Hello, United States. My name is Roger Sherman, and welcome to another edition of The Roger Sherman Show. For those of you not familiar with me, you may recall me from my involvement in the Constitutional Convention of 1787 and my creation of the Great Compromise, otherwise known as the Connecticut Plan. But today is not about me. Today I am merely your host for today's debate about one of the most hot topics going around our country today. That topic is gun control. Our two guests today will be arguing whether the matter of gun regulation should be decided by the federal government itself or whether the issue would be more properly handled by the state governments. Speaking of those guests, we first have our Antifederalist, Mr. John Lansing Jr.
Hello, my name is John Lansing Jr., and I'm a lawyer and politician. I'm an anti-federalist and I'm a strong advocate for states' rights. I will be arguing that gun control should be regulated on a state level.
Then we have our Federalist, Mr. John Langdon.
Hello, I'm John Langdon. I've been a merchant for my entire life and I'm currently a delegate of New Hampshire. As a Federalist, I believe gun control should be handled strictly by the federal government.
Now, to those of you who are worried about the fact that a Federalist will be moderating this debate, do not worry. I will be adding nothing to the conversation as far as my own opinions or arguments are concerned. So let's get started then. We will have our Federalists go first. One of the reasons we are even talking about this is because of shootings like the attack on the Republican baseball practice, where a gunman walked onto a federally owned baseball field and shot Republican members of Congress like Representative Steve Scalise. So, Mr. Langdon, how would you respond to something like that?
I would like to start by saying gun violence is an issue happening all over the country, and attacks like what happened at the baseball game are happening everywhere. Every citizen has a right to public safety and to be protected from the misuse of firearms, no matter where in the country they reside.
I agree with that, but the federal government is not doing anything about this issue. More citizens are going to state legislatures with issues dealing with gun rights. Although gun violence is an issue happening all over the country, there are some states where it is a bigger issue than in others. With this being so, more initiative is being taken in the areas where people feel more strongly about the gun policies. In states that are more liberal, gun laws are more strict than states that are generally more conservative. With this being so, different state legislatures can get more done than on a federal level, which is right now primarily conservative. With that being said, the recreational use of guns such as hunting is very popular in some states. Since different states have different values, the ones with lesser attraction to recreational use of guns are going to their state legislatures to deal with the gun safety laws. The Second Amendment's phrase, "the right of people to keep and bear arms," creates an individual constitutional right for citizens of the United States. This restricts legislative bodies from prohibiting firearm possession, but state bodies possess the right to regulate firearms without implicating a constitutional right.
First, why should the culture specific to certain regions of the United States endanger the safety of its citizens? Second, those who acquire hunting permits and other legal means of handling guns aren't the ones being targeted by an overall enforced federal gun policy. The federal government would just be trying to make sure that firearms don't fall into the wrong hands. This is why a federal government gun policy is so important. Without a consistent national gun policy, there would be some states that are more lax on gun control than others. This invites people who don't qualify for carrying a gun in their own state to travel and acquire one easily in a less restrictive state, making the institution of any state-level gun laws obsolete. The Waffle House shooting took place under these exact conditions. The shooter, Rankin, was revoked of his license to carry firearms in Illinois. His father acquired his guns, returned them to Rankin, who then shot up a Tennessee Waffle House, killing 4.
Although gun laws vary in each state, there still needs to be some regulations on the state level. If gun laws were only enforced on the federal level, a lot more violence would occur because the National Army would not be able to protect every state. This is why states should have their own laws so that they're held accountable for their laws and how they enforce them. The economies of some states are big on selling and manufacturing guns versus others. If strict nationwide regulations are put in place, then the economies of some states will be affected. If bigger restrictions are placed on guns, more people would not be able to purchase guns, thus leading to a decline in profits in the gun industry. Article 1, Section 8 regulates interstate commerce and states that commerce conducted within a state's borders must comply with state law.
Enforcing a national gun control policy wouldn't have a significant effect on the supply and demand for the firearm industry. Because of the strong pro-gun cultures of groups all across the United States, there will always be people who embrace their Second Amendment right. The majority of the gun industry currently doesn't rely on people who would fail background checks or who don't have any of the appropriate licenses, and implying so is to say that the gun industry relies on school shooters and domestic terrorists. Placing national gun restrictions would only benefit firearm users by preventing dangerous people from acquiring and abusing these weapons. Furthermore, the Second Amendment states that a well-regulated militia is necessary to the security of a free state. Because the federal government is in charge of the military, the Constitution delegates the power of regulating gun control to the federal government.
So there have also been many disputes over the interpretation of the first half of the Second Amendment, namely, a well-regulated militia. So Lansing, how would you interpret that phrase of the amendment?
The militia portion of the Second Amendment refers to when our nation is in a state of war. We're more often in a state of peace than in a state of war. The gun policy would not be able to be enforced unless it were in times of war on a federal level. It needs to be enforced more often than that, so states should have the right to enforce gun control. Although the Second Amendment can be interpreted on a federal level, but the federal government is very inactive on this issue, so if anything would get done, it would be in the state legislatures. More people are showing initiative on the state level. The federal government is not paying enough attention to this issue for anything to get done. People have a higher chance of things getting done at a state level because the Supreme Court only sees so many cases a year. Also, due to the fact that the federal government is mainly Republican right now, they are more interested in dealing with other problems rather than the gun policy.
A national gun policy would be enacted by the legislative branch. The federal policy would have to go through the same process in the houses as it would on a state level.
This is true, but why is nothing getting done on a federal level then?
Currently, efforts to enforce our gun control policies are severely underfunded, making them ineffective. This isn't an issue with the policies itself, but with the way in which both the state and federal governments delegate their resources. Plus, there are many loopholes in our current gun laws that, if remedied on a federal level, could significantly reduce gun violence across the country.
All right, gentlemen. Listen, I would love to have you two argue this issue for an even longer time, but unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. We will be back next week with a whole new topic and a new batch of guests to lead the conversation of this nation's most pressing issues. My name is Roger Sherman, and this is The Roger Sherman Show.